From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. Cults are still a thing then in the 21st century. Cults were so 1970s, they're still a thing. There is a trolley. There's a trolley in the middle of the River Mersey near Chorlton. I might commandeer the trolley, declare it to be an island, and declare my independence. Why not? How you doing? Thursday, it is 3 minutes past the hour. My name is Richie Allen. Hope you've had a good day. I've got a really good programme for you today. Looking forward to it. Thanks for joining me.
Richie Allen.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, the former politician, radio broadcaster, journalist, the writer Tommy Sheridan joins the programme as this hour. I'm looking forward to it. We're a week away, as Ollie Barrett said there in the news, from the election. Thank God it'll be all over in a week. Tommy Sheridan joins us live from Scotland this hour. Can't wait to speak with him. And later on, Maria Heller returns to the programme. A lot of news in the US today around the impeachment proceedings against US President Donald Trump. We'll catch up with Maria on that and much more besides. This is Thursday's Richie Allen Show. It is broadcasting on multiple platforms, you know that. And you can tweet me between now and the end of the programme with your comments on anything being discussed, and as usual, I love to read them, so I do, be Jesus. Hey, straight into it. This is mad stuff, isn't it? Mad stuff. I was reading the BBC website today, and here's a headline for you. BBC News website. The headline is BBC to promote black and minority senior leaders. This is from Tony Hall, the big cheese, the BBC Director General. He says we need more black people at the top of the BBC. Last year, the BBC needed more lesbians. Senior bosses have now embarked on a crusade to find more black managers. So they must have been successful in their crusade to get some more lesbians. I wonder, where did they go? Did they go to Lesbania, to Lesbos? Or did they just go down to Canal Street in Manchester and hand out leaflets? Are you a lesbian? Well, we have a job for you. But it's blacks today. Hall outlined the new strategy around our BAME, that's black, Asian and minority ethnic talent. He sent an email to all BBC staff on Thursday, and the email was headed, "Going further in building a creative, inclusive BBC." We can't be the creative, inclusive organisation we want to be if we're not representative of the whole of the UK, wrote Lord Hall. But wait. Black people, as in black, African, Caribbean black, they make up 3% of the nation's population. And I'm pretty sure there are more. The BBC has more than 3%. Its staff contains more than 3% black people. Pretty sure of that. We'll come back to that in a minute. Earlier in the week, the BBC said they would give us a more authentic and distinctive representation of disabled people on screen. We don't have enough disabled people. And back in October, last month, 6 weeks or so ago, they appointed June Sarpong as the BBC's first Director of Creative Diversity. Yes, you guessed it, June Sarpong is black. And in the summer, they said they would have at least 2 BAME members on every senior leadership group by the end of 2020. Yes, we want to nurture and develop new leaders to extend the range of our thinking, says Lord Hall. He said, we want a culture that enables diversity of thought. Strange times. I want you to read this. I want you to read. I'll tell you what, I'll read it for you. This is the BBC's 2017-2018 diversity report. This is their own report now. Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, that's BAME, representation is currently 14.8% across the workforce. And of those, 10.4% are working in leadership roles. Wow. The BBC is one of 66 employers and the only broadcaster and media organisation which made the 2017 Best Employers for Race listing. So 14.8% of the workforce is BAME as it stands, and 10.4% of them are in leadership roles already. But the problem is, the percentage of BAME people in the UK is 13%. Imagine it. Imagine working at the BBC putting up with this stuff. And here's another directive from the top of the BBC. It reads, all BBC staff will have unconscious bias training. And we have developed a new disability awareness training package for managers and staff. Jesus wept. What could be in the disability awareness training package? This is 2019. What do they need to tell people? Able-bodied people. What do we need to be told about disabled people? What that we don't already know? Jesus wept, huh? That's where it's going, you know. Here's an idea. How about you appoint a person to do whatever job you have advertised based solely on their ability to do it? How about that? Regardless of whether they're white, black, Hispanic, pink, green, what their sexuality is, whether they can stand up by themselves or whether they need to use a wheelchair. Doesn't fucking matter. But of course, this is, in the BBC, it's a small part of a wider agenda, isn't it? Isn't it? Social justice, isn't it? Right. We'll leave that for the time being. I think we might return to it in the near future. Nancy Pelosi is the US Speaker. She's the House Speaker. And she said today that the House of Representatives will file impeachment charges against US President Donald Trump for alleged abuse of power. Our democracy is at stake, said Ms. Pelosi. Do you want to hear her? You don't? Tough shit, Paddy. Here she is.
In America, no one is above the law. Over the past few weeks, through the Intelligence Committee working with the Foreign Affairs and Oversight Committees, the American people have heard the testimony of truly patriotic career public servants, distinguished diplomats, and decorated war heroes, some of the president's own appointees. The facts are uncontested. The president abused his power for his own personal political benefit. The president leaves us no choice but to act.
No choice but to act. To act, says Nancy Pelosi, the speaker there, the House Speaker. Trump said the Democrats have gone crazy. Them's crazy people, said Trump. And he urged them to move quickly if they wanted to impeach him. Because the Democrats have a majority in the House, they will probably pass the impeachment vote. It will be carried, but there isn't any indication right now that the Republican-controlled Senate would in fact vote to kick Trump out of office. But this is very interesting, and we will return to it a little bit later on in the programme. Want to give a quick mention to the strikes in France. I'll be talking briefly about this with Tommy Sheridan shortly. It's the largest nationwide strike in years. And as you heard in the news, it's disrupted schools and transport. Right. Teachers and transport workers joined by police, lawyers, hospital and airport staff and other professions. What's it about? Well, I know a little bit about this. It's about a universal points-based pension system proposed by President Emmanuel Macron, which would replace the current pension system. At the moment, France has over 40 different pension schemes in the private and public sector. And there are variations, basically, in some of these schemes in terms of the retirement age and certain benefits. So Macron, the Rothschild man, of course, in France, and that's what he is. He's a Rothschild banker sitting at the highest seat of French politics. Can't ever forget that. A Rothschild man. He says, well, no, it's all lovely, really. We want to take care of people. We just want to, make it a more easily accessible and easy to understand system. A universal one. Everybody will be fine. No. He wants to fuck people in their old age. Screw them. Like my mother-in-law to be. This is Agenda 2030. Please believe me, this isn't conspiracy theory. It's a little part of the death cult. Retirees are seen by the elite, aren't they, as useless eaters. We've robbed them. This is the elite talking now. We've robbed them all their working lives. But now they don't slave for us anymore. Let's steal their houses now. Let's steal their houses. Honestly, this is what's going on. So vive la France, and to the workers, from all sectors across France who are going to be allegedly who are going to carry on these strikes even until Macron backs down. I say to them, the workers united will never be divided, and bon chance, bon chance. Tommy Sheridan will have an opinion on this, no doubt, very shortly. The Lib Dems have been doubling down today on their gender equality madness plans, which are enshrined in their manifesto. Joe Swinson was talking today, announcing these plans to completely reform the Gender Recognition Act if they get into power. The proposals include scrapping the need for medical reports to identify as a different gender. The proposals include recognising non-binary genders and include requiring schools to introduce gender-neutral uniforms and also the X-gender option on passports and other official documents. It's madness. It is insane. That lunatic Christy Elan Kane took this to the High Court, didn't she, this week? The High Court has heard the arguments, has retired and will deliver a decision in the next few weeks. Let's hope she loses. Christy Elan Kane, these nutcases, let's hope they lose it. Let's hope that we can fight back against this effort to legitimise madness. Let's fucking fight back against people telling us that we've got to sign up to your lunacy. I don't mind you being a lunatic. If you want to go about in life telling people that you're non-binary, I'm non-binary, I don't identify with any, that's fucking fine, and I'm happy enough to work with you, even to have a drink with you. But when you tell me that I've got to, make some sort of obeisance to it, no, you fucked with the wrong paddy. Anyway, Lib Dem candidate Christine Jardine was on talk radio with Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Julia Hartley-Brewer gave her what for, goddammit.
You don't just go out one day and say, do you know what? I'm not going to be a man anymore, I'm going to be a woman. I'm not going to be a woman anymore, I want to be a man. It is huge.
The policy you support would allow... We know it's not that easy. The policy you support would allow that.
Julia, do you honestly think that someone would put themselves through the abuse, the misery, everything, on a whim, or, let's be honest.
Christine, the whole point, no. The whole point is we're not talking about genuine trans people. We're talking about perverts and women's abusers who will use this law to gain access to women's safe places and will be able to use it. We've already seen it happen.
Anyone who goes to a refuge, anyone, absolutely anyone, deserves our support through the trauma they're going through, whatever it might be. They have not gone there. They've not taken that decision lightly, and there's been a lot of pain.
Including a 6'4" man who says he's a woman.
And that trauma is something that we have to respect. Anyone who goes there needs our support.
No, we don't have to respect it. We do not have to respect it. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a big baldy gammon. This isn't the BBC, it's the BBG. Well, I've got a heart the size of fucking Manchester. I'll stand alongside anybody who's being discriminated against because of their sexual orientation or because of how they identify. Ironically, I'll stand alongside you. I'll march with you. I'll fight for you to be left alone. But we don't have to respect anything. I don't have to respect that you go about in life thinking that you're non-gendered. I don't have to respect that. Not at all. I have the right to say that's a load of bollocks there, kid. It's a load of monumental bollocks, but good luck with it. I wish you all the very best with it. But don't tell me I have to abide by it, because I don't. I think it's all a little bit crazy, And this Lib Dem woman is mad, but she is the majority now, you see. Can't speak out about this because you might get a knock on the door from Plod, because it's hate speech now to say what I've just said, funnily enough.
And to respect a woman, no, Christine, to respect a woman who's been beaten by her long-term partner and escapes to the refuge, to then have a 6'4" man, biological man, come in a dress and say, oh, well, I'm a woman and I need help too. You don't think that...
Yeah, I need a refuge too. Yeah.
You don't think that's not disrespecting those women and their need to be safe from men?
I think you're disrespecting the commitment, the talent, and the
commitment and the talent. What Julia Hartley-Brewer is finding out in the interview is you can't argue with stupid. You can't win. You can't beat an idiot in an argument. So the best thing to do is just not to argue with them. Yeah, gender madness, lovely. What else have we got for you today? Had to laugh this morning. Was watching Good Morning Britain. Jeremy Corbyn was hammered yesterday for appearing to lie about whether he did or didn't watch the Queen's speech. I said last night, and I stand by it, if this guy had an ordinary gene in his body, if there was any part of Corbyn which was identifiable as an ordinary man, as a bloke, he'd be 15 points clear at the top of the table. He'd be ahead of Liverpool now, Corbyn would be, if he was an ordinary bloke. Julie Etchingham, do you watch the Queen's speech? You know, if he'd have just said no, I couldn't be arsed. Couldn't be arsed, Julie. I've no interest in the Queen whatsoever. The ordinary man and woman would have said, go Jezza. But he's such a bullshitter, Corbyn. He tied himself up in knots, saying that he watched it before 3 o'clock. Anyway, Angela Rayner, who's from around these parts, she's a Corbynite. She's a Labour MP out in Ashton Way, I think. Ashton Way, towards the east of the city. Yeah. Well, she was on the same she was on ITV this morning, and she was defending Corbyn and his tall tale about the Queen's speech. This is quite good because Rayner, to her credit, does make a very good point.
Well, I mean, he might watch it on catch-up. Some of us do. Some of us have our dinner at different times, you know.
He said he watched it in the morning.
She sounds a bit like Bez, doesn't she?
In the morning. He's lied in it.
I love Bez.
To sell off the NHS. I mean, this is clutching at straws. You've not played any clips of what Boris Johnson has said about the NHS in the past. You've only played the clips that you believe gives them the evidence
you're the
that they
Shadow
won't
Education
sell off the
Secretary for
NHS.
Labour, though,
Which
Angela, and that's why I'm bringing up your leader.
Yeah, but of course, but you've played clips that you're saying that because Jeremy Corbyn said that he watched the Queen's speech in the morning, which, by the way, he could do on catch-up, you're suggesting that means that he's unreliable and untrustworthy. But Boris Johnson is trustworthy because he suddenly said that the NHS isn't up for sale and Donald Trump has. But they've both said in the past that the NHS could be in the private sector and could be part of trade deals, and yet you've not played any of those clips. So I think
brilliant there. She's cut the legs out from under Ben Shepherd, I think it is, and Susanna Reid. She said, you've been running clips this morning of Johnson saying the NHS is not for sale. However, we have audio and video, it's in the public domain, of Johnson saying the opposite in the past. So why don't you run those clips, she is saying. And they're not too happy about it because up their own arse, national television presenters, very fond of themselves, they don't like being made to look idiots by anybody, let alone Labour politicians.
So I think that's not very balanced. Jeremy,
not balanced at all.
Angela Rayner, to be fair, our job is to challenge you on Labour Party policy and you on your claims and you on your leaders' claims.
She's not saying that though, Susanna Reid. She is saying that if you're going to put clips on your news programmes in the morning, clips of Johnson dismissing out of hand the notion that the NHS will be discussed in a future trade agreement with America, it is your obligation as a news organisation to balance that with the clips that you have in your fucking archive that go back, that show both Johnson and Trump saying at different times that the NHS is interested, you know, and would be opened up to US healthcare providers. Good point made by Rayner.
But I'm happy to deal with that, but please play a balanced clip. I'm telling you that Boris Johnson and Donald Trump have both made comments in the past that mean that I don't believe that what they've said just because we're in a general election about the NHS is true. Good
stuff. And you're asking me about Jeremy Corbyn and the Queen's Christmas Day message. Yeah, you've got to agree with her there. 22 minutes it is past the hour. I think that's enough from me for a minute or two. I've got Tommy Sheridan coming on in a minute, and after that, Maria Heller will be joining us. I wonder about this Trump impeachment. It's an interesting one, really, in terms of it's going to pass Congress, but the Senate, I wonder. It shouldn't likely pass the Senate because the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. But how many Republicans might flip? All very interesting, this, in terms of the reaction, you know. And I wonder about these things being carefully staged. The reaction that would be induced in Trump's legions of fans on the alternative right. Well, we'll see. Right now, though, music from Jeff Lynne. Want to say hi to Jean Ann Crowley, a great friend and colleague of mine. She's in Cleggan there on the west of Ireland, and she hasn't been well the last couple of days. She's a bit better today. Bit of a virus, nasty old bug. but she's feeling a bit better today. Bit of Jeff Lynne's ELO for Jean Ann, back in a couple of minutes with Tommy Sheridan. ELO on the Richie Allen Show, Evil Woman, 25 and a half minutes past 5. It is Thursday afternoon. Salford and Greater Manchester. We'll eventually have a traffic and travel report here. At 25 past 5, the traffic is diabolical. It's as simple as that. There's no need to go to the chopper, to the eye in the sky. I could introduce my first guest about 17, 18 different ways, because he's had many guises in his life. A successful politician, socialist, broadcaster, successful broadcaster, television personality, MSP, of course, writing these days for Sputnik. Always very interesting to read him, and this is a great time to chat with him because we are a week away. Next Thursday the country goes to the polls. By saying the country, I might annoy him by saying that. The UK goes to the polls next Thursday. We'll talk about that with him and much more in the next 30 minutes or thereabouts. Welcome back to the programme, Tommy Sheridan. Tommy, welcome back.
Thanks very much, Richie. I don't know what it's like down your neck of the woods, mate, but it's absolutely honking up here. It's a horrible night. It's pouring. It's cold, icy rain. But on the flip side, the Christmas lights that are up on the street look a lot brighter because it's so dark. And maybe that's a wee bit of a vision for this election. Things appear dark, but that only allows the bright lights to shine brighter. I hope in my heart that there will be a big, massive ditch built in time for next Thursday, and that Boris Johnson will be in it on Friday 13th.
And his pals with him. Before we talk about that, I wanted to get your thoughts on what's been happening in France today. As a trade unionist myself, I love what's happening in France. I love that tens of thousands of people have said to the government there, we're not going to stop until you roll back on these new pension reforms, which ultimately are going to prove devastating for many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of French people in their old age. I described it earlier on, Tommy, as the elite saying to people, you are now useless eaters when you hit your pension age. You no longer contribute. We can't rob you in work. So now we're going to rob your assets, what you've saved, and we're going to rob your homes. I say vive la France and bon chance to the French strikers there. Are you watching that with interest?
100% behind you, Richie. I sometimes there's even a wee tinge of jealousy sometimes, because I do think the French workers are less intimidated and sometimes more organised than we are here across the UK. They're less intimidated by anti-trade union laws and the state, because the state's out in heavy-handed numbers, as you can see. But these workers, they're determined that they've established rights over many, many years, and one of the rights was to a pension at a particular time of retirement. And Macron's turning around and saying, no, we're going to change all that. Well, I'm sorry. He may be a multi-millionaire and able to retire whenever he likes and live off the hog of the lamb, but most workers can't do that. They rely on these pensions, and I just think we should be showing international solidarity and saying more power to your elbow.
Yeah, I love that. My future mother-in-law is French, and she'll be affected by it. Well, I'd be interested in it anyway as a trade unionist, but yeah, it's very important that. And you know, I echo what you said there about being envious. Can I ask you on that subject about being envious? You're an expert. I've often listened to you over the years and read you talking about this. One of the problems we have here is, I believe, the Conservative Party government under Thatcher, and then the lying murderer Blair and his government, they kind of doubled down on it. They've been attacking trade unions for years in this country, and solidarity strikes, I believe, are very important, and I also believe they're a human right. Now, we've heard a few whispers from John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn. They won't deny outright that they would pave the way for solidarity strikes again in the future. What do you think of that?
I think they have to. It's a basic freedom, in my opinion, Richie. I mean, it's no accident, is it, that Mrs. Thatcher and her government targeted the trade union movement, and in particular, if you recall, the trade union acts that were introduced under Thatcher outlawed solidarity action. And, take one example of why that is so horrendous. If you are a nurse or an emergency worker in the health service, your wages and conditions matter just as much as any other workers. Your pension rates matter just as much as any other worker. But if you take strike action, then you could be directly endangering someone's life. So you are therefore blackmailed emotionally not to fight for your wages and your conditions and your family's futures. However, with solidarity action, other workers can take action on your behalf in solidarity with you, so that you can have health strikes where other workers not essential to life and limb can strike on behalf of those that are essential for life and limb. That's the way it used to be before Thatcher introduced the trade union laws and outlawed secondary action. So in my opinion, Corbyn and McDonnell are saying they are going to repeal the Trade Union Acts. If they repeal the Trade Union Acts, we go back to where we were. And that means that there is the human right, A, to withdraw your own labour, and B, to strike on behalf of others who may not be in the position to do so. That is basic human rights, Richie, and I support 100%.
Brilliant. A couple of comments on that on Twitter. Base Ninja is an ex-Bec2 rep and agrees. He says, I'm very envious at how the French workers stand up. The UK needs to start saying, he says, Fouk, no, we need to start doing the same. And Steve tweets, Steve James, he says, the French are more organised and steadfast in their protests against corporate government oppressions. The British are far too complacent, lethargic and dumbed down, I'm afraid. Yeah, you could make that argument. Also, life has become very difficult for so many people. You know, trying to live even when both couples or both halves of a couple are working, trying to make ends meet even though you've got two people in work, trying to pay childcare. It's difficult for people these days to have the time. You know, the world is spinning so fast around them to think about these things. But it'll be interesting if they do get in. We can cover lots between now and 6 o'clock, Tommy, or just after 6. I know that you were very concerned about the health of Julian Assange in Belmarsh prison. I know a number of doctors last week came together and said that even visually and even through one or two meetings with him and through notes taken by Assange's legal representation, they believe that the man's health is grave and that he might even be at death's door. And you made the point, I know you've been making the point, that here we have a guy who's wanted for extradition in the United States of America. He's committed no crime in the United States of America. He published materials that were given to him, which the public had to know about, which we needed to see. And on the other side of it, we have a privileged heir in Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. I'm not going to say what he is and what he isn't guilty of. He's entitled to be considered innocent until proven guilty, but there are a lot of questions for him because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and others. There's a real paradox there. Assange, what do you think? You're very concerned about what's happening to him right now.
It is, Richie, probably one of the most tragic stories across the world today. You have a man who has effectively been punished for 7 whole years through solitary confinement in the Ecuadorial embassy. This is a man who had to seek refuge in that embassy to avoid extradition to the United States of America because they wanted to charge him under an archaic law, the Espionage Act, which was formed in World War I. That's how far back it goes. And carries a sentence of 175 years. So if Julian Assange was to be deported to America, then what you're talking about is the end of his life. It's no longer going to have any life because you'll never see him again. 175 years. We have a situation where in order to avoid that, the guy put himself into solitary confinement. He should have been safe there, But of course, America then ordered that he be arrested regardless of diplomatic immunity, and he now finds himself in Britain's Guantanamo Bay in Belmarsh prison, where he is in February next year going to face an extradition hearing. And we have to say loud and clear here, this guy's only crime, inverted commas, is to expose the war crimes and extrajudicial murders of innocent people ordered and carried out by the United States of America and the CIA. Those are crimes which he, through WikiLeaks, exposed to the rest of the world. The powerful like to abuse power and authority in the dark. We need people to shine the light on these abuses of power and authority. That's what Julian Assange has done. It's not a crime. That is something he should be rewarded for, something he should be lauded for. He's a modern day hero, not a criminal. And of course his name has been dragged through the mud where people think, oh, is that not the guy that's responsible for sex crimes? Is that not the guy that is a bit of a geek, a bit of a weirdo? He has been absolutely assassinated as a person via the media, where of course we now find that the Swedish authorities have thoroughly investigated any of the sex crime allegations and thrown them out, lock, stock and barrel. This is no criminal, this is an innocent man. And I'll tell you what, Richie, if we as journalists, if we as people who believe in truth and freedom don't stand up for this guy, then the Pastor Nima poem will come to haunt us, because first they came from Assange and nobody stood up for him. Next it'll be us. We have to stand up.
Absolutely right. I wonder if Jeremy Corbyn was to form the next government, even in a coalition government, would it be of any help to Julian Assange? I suppose we'll have to wait and see. Let's talk about the election then. Just a word on Prince Andrew. Allegations that he's denied, and regardless of how much anybody has or what their privilege is, they're entitled to defend themselves and see the evidence against them and all of that. However, his interview with Newsnight was an absolute car crash. It was obvious that he was being untruthful. And I think I can say that in all fairness. What impact do you think that has had in Scotland with respect to, would it have hardened nationalists in Scotland, hardened them even further still against the Union? But even more interestingly, would people who are maybe sitting on the fence about whether Scotland should be independent, would that, sleaze these allegations about Andrew and the way the palace has behaved, in dealing with it, is that maybe swaying people who might be on the fence before they go to the polls next Thursday? What do you think, Tommy?
Richie, it's an interesting point, mate, and I'm not sure that it is going to be critical. I'm not sure that it will move a particularly high number of people. I think the law of unintended consequences will hopefully kick in with the whole Prince Andrew fiasco, because quite frankly, once the Queen dies, that should be it.
Yeah.
Let's wind up this totally archaic institution. What he has exposed, in my opinion, and people talk about the one rotten apple in the barrel. This isn't a rotten apple in a barrel. This is a rotten apple from an orchard of rotten apples. The royal family represents absolutely obscene wealth, privilege, arrogance, and Prince Andrew reflected that in all its glory during his Newsnight interview. He couldn't give a damn about the victims of Epstein's sex trafficking. He couldn't give a damn about the lives that were ruined through their games that they played as rich millionaires and billionaires hopping across the world to their various haunts. This is a guy who exposed exactly the inner darkness that the privileged elite represent. And from my point of view, never mind supporting independence, I think it has accelerated the numbers who are saying to themselves, come on, it's time for a republic. It's time to get rid of these unelected, totally unrepresentative and certainly undemocratic misfits. They talk about the scoundrels in society. Here's the biggest set of scroungers living at Buckingham Palace and all of the other land across the whole of the UK and further afield as the Panama Papers exposed. So from my point of view, I think what that whole fiasco is exposing is the need to get rid of the royal family.
Yeah, they're vile, yeah, absolutely. Well, as an Irish Republican, socialist, what else would I say? But they are, of course, vile, and they do have a tendency to fall in love with paedophiles and those who would prey on children. I mean, Charles was an avowed, he was a self-confessed best friend of Jimmy Savile, a record-breaking paedophile. Again, I don't accuse Prince Charles of anything, but why do we live in a country where the detectives looking into these things wouldn't speak to him as somebody of interest? I agree with. Listen, I want to move on then to Scottish independence.
Richie,
Go ahead.
Just on that point, as a dead important point that, you and I may be aware of this, but and probably your listener base is aware of this, but if they're not aware of this, please consider this for a moment. Consider the way the media is behaving in relation to the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and all of the crap, all of the utter urine that we're hearing about him being an anti-Semite. Think about this. That same group of billionaires who own and control the press and the media and society used to tell us that George Michael was a pervert, that Jimmy Savile was a fine upstanding man that deserved a knighthood. Please listen to yourself. Please reflect on the reality of George Michael being a brilliant human being with compassion and love in his heart, and Savile being nothing more than a paedophile that preyed on vulnerable children. That's who the media wanted you to support. We've found out about that now. Think about what the media is telling you now, and don't allow them to hide the facts any longer.
YouGov did a poll 10 days ago that showed that Corbyn was finished. It was impossible. That's what the poll said. Johnson was going to get 366 seats and he was going to form a majority. Now, you and I have been around a long time and I've covered more elections than I've had hot dinners. So I know that these polls, particularly 2 or 3 weeks out, are to be taken with a pinch of salt, even if the survey was over 100,000 people. What I've begun to believe is, as they keep this anti-Semitism accusations against Corbyn going, and as they seemingly never die away. Again, we've had it today, a group of people again that took part in the Panorama documentary. They went public again today to say that Corbyn has done nothing about it. It's terrible. What I'm actually seeing is there is a bit of over-egging of the pudding here. And I think that
I hope so.
There's an unsilent majority, I think, in society that doesn't like bullying and doesn't like that sort of harassment. And they're looking at Corbyn and they're thinking, why are they going after this guy so much? Why did they keep accusing him of this? And as we've seen in the last few days, this lead allegedly that Johnson had, this big lead, has narrowed somewhat. And a week is a long time in politics, let alone a minute. So I wonder, Tommy, what do you think? Have they over-egged the pudding with these accusations of anti-Semitism?
There is no doubt in any thinking person's mind. Now, there will be some people who may be empty vessels and can be filled with the easiest amount of crap that's going. But see if you have got at least 2 morsels of brain matter, surely you can see that Corbyn, far from being an anti-Semite, far from being a racist, is someone who's spent his adult life, physically and politically opposing fascism, anti-Semitism and racism. You see, Corbyn quite rightly says, yes, there is anti-Semitism within the Labour Party and we're fighting it. But the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is nothing compared to the anti-Semitism that exists within the Tory Party and nothing compared to the anti-Semitism that exists in society as a whole. Anti-Semitism is born from the right wing, not the left wing. The midwife of anti-Semitism is the right, is the fascists, and they are more likely to be on the side of the Tories and the right wing in society. The idea that this man is an anti-Semite is just so ridiculous that I hope what you're saying is true, that people will begin to say, wait a wee minute, This is so much rubbish. If they're telling this rubbish about him on this point, maybe they're talking rubbish about him on other points as well. I wrote a column recently, and you very gratefully liked it, and I did make the point that the press, the rich and the powerful in this society, they pish all over us, and then they get the media to tell us it's raining.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the reality of what happens in society.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to say that. And one of the things that distresses me as somebody who's worked at every level of the media, you know, from running to get the sandwiches to producing top commercial radio shows to presenting them, I've done it bloody well all. And what really distresses me more than anything is ITV, Sky, Channel 4 and the BBC, they know that there are some very prevalent, very powerful Jewish voices in the UK that are fully behind Jeremy Corbyn. This makes me sick. And they never invite these people on. And you know, actually, do you know what annoys me about that, Tommy? Corbyn annoys me. Because Corbyn comes across very badly in some of these interviews. And I wish that he would take on some of the interviewers and say, listen, hang on a second. Why?
I agree with you, Richie. Yeah. I watched being interviewed with Andrew Neil, as you probably did.
Yeah.
And I was wishing him to just turn around and saying, what are you talking about, apologise? Well, I've got nothing to apologise for. I've never been an anti-Semite, I've never been a racist, and any time I've been alerted to it within the Labour Party, I've taken action on it. It reminded me of the old issue in relation to interview techniques. Have you stopped beating your wife?
Yeah.
You know, what's the answer to that? You know, and that's what Andrew Neil put him into a position of. And of course it got worse. It wasn't just, have you stopped beating your wife? It was then, what do you mean you haven't beaten your wife? Are you going to apologise for beating your wife? Even though you haven't beat your wife. I mean, it was so ridiculous. And I just wish, Jeremy is a nice guy, Richie. He is a genuinely nice guy. But sometimes, you know, it's a bit like on the football field. We all need the ball players. We need the guys that are going to make the passes. But you also need the ball winners. And sometimes I wish there was a wee bit more of the ball winner in Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, you need a bit of Roy Aitken, a bit of Danny McGrain in there, don't you? You need a bit of Roy Keane, yeah. Well, that pisses me off as well, yeah.
So from your point of view, down in Manchester, you need your David Beckhams. But David Beckham without Roy Keane, you know, wouldn't have won any games.
No, absolutely right. What about the prospect? I don't think it's beyond the bounds of possibility. I mean, I don't know what to predict. There is a chance that Corbyn, as this lead dwindles, and I think it'll dwindle further, because as Johnson goes about various schools and he's doing the media again today, you know, going very negative, and we're not used to that in the UK in the same way they are in the United States, and I think it'll play against Johnson, constantly going negative against Corbyn. I think the lead might dwindle further still over the weekend. So what about the possibility?
No doubt about it, Richie. Here's a point which all of us have to consider. How many young people registered to vote? Deliberately went out their way to register to vote. The statistics show that over 3 million predominantly young people registered to vote, and all of the opinion polls show, all of them show, if you're young, you're more likely to vote for Corbyn. And here's another point. The BBC, ITV, Channel 4, they're all giving all of this coverage to some chief rabbi friend of Johnson, who is pontificating and bumping his gums on behalf, you know, he says he's speaking for Jews, but he's speaking for a party that actually undermines society itself and forces 14 million people into poverty. And this guy speaks up for him. He should be ashamed of himself if he's a religious leader. But here's the point. What is your Stormzy's of the world saying? What are the other pop artists saying? What are all the youth young people that play music that are in the Odyssey? What do they all say? Who are they all behind? They're all behind Corbyn. And you know what? Very few of those people are reflected in the polls. Very few of those people are getting interviewed on the national television. And where do young people get their news nowadays, Richie? They don't get it for BBC and BBC. They get it for the internet. They get it for their heroes and their heroines that they follow in the social media. So from my point of view, you and me are a certain generation. We're probably out of touch. But I read about young female artist yesterday, and it was a story about how she was calling for people to vote for Corbyn on the basis of the compassion and the basis of redistribution of wealth. And I thought, oh, that's great. Now, I can't even remember her name, but it says she had 3.6 million UK Twitter followers.
Wow.
3.6 million. Now, from my point of view, we are not taking on board the effect of some of this. Social media is very powerful. In 2017, let's not forget, everybody but everybody in the media was writing Corbyn's obituaries. His political obituaries were written by all of the well-paid, puffed-up political pundits. And what happened? They all had to eat humble pie. And I think there's a big chance it could happen again.
And you wouldn't imagine that Labour would win a majority, but you could see Labour and the Scottish Nationals forming a coalition. That's very interesting, that the dynamic between Nicola Sturgeon and Jeremy Corbyn, the things that they're saying and not saying on the campaign trail, makes it obvious to me that they're open to that relationship in the future after next Thursday. What have you got to say about that, Tommy?
In many respects, Richie, I would say what Jeremy Corbyn couldn't say, and that is, I think it's actually a dream ticket, because you look at the red lines that Nicola Sturgeon has come up with. Now, park for a moment independence, because Jeremy has to say that he doesn't support independence, but he has said that he will, because of the will of the Scottish people, be willing to support a second referendum. But what has Nicola said? She said, we've got 3 red lines. One is another independence referendum. That's taken as read. But she's also said that one of her red lines for support is the removal of Trident from Scottish waters. She's also said that one of her red lines is that austerity is finished and that NHS funding across the whole of the UK is put onto even footing with what's happening here in Scotland. Now, end of austerity, getting rid of nuclear weapons, and an independence referendum sometime next year. Do I think that Jeremy Corbyn could live with that? I think he could grasp it with both hands, but he can't see it. He can't see it because his party, unfortunately, has forced him to go into this election with a pledge to keep Trident. It is simply the most abusive waste of money on the planet. £200 billion, Richie, on...
I hope we haven't lost Tommy there.
Scrap metal.
You're back. We lost you momentarily. But that's a very important point. No, it's not your fault. We only lost you for about 5 seconds. That's a very important point you're making about Trident. Because again, we're back to the media. We've got Blair and Alistair Campbell, mass murderers, genocidal maniacs, criticising Corbyn. You've got Tories that were involved in selling weapons to Saudi Arabia to obliterate Yemen with, and they have the cheek to say that Corbyn would leave, Britain or the UK as a very unsafe country. Imagine that. These people have killed more people, again, than we've had hot dinners. They've caused migrant flow. They've caused terrorism around the world. They funded terrorists, and they claimed that Corbyn would be a threat to national security. I don't know how I haven't thrown... I did when I was younger. I did it one time. I had my Elvis moment. I threw a telly out the window many years ago. It's hard to watch that stuff, Tommy. It's hard to watch that, isn't it? And listen to that nonsense.
Listen, the hypocrisy of this election is absolutely stomach-churning, Richie. It makes you puke. There's no doubt about it. You have got to watch these shows in order to write your columns and you're a broadcaster. You have to know what's in the news. But see, if you didn't have to, why would you? Why would you subject yourself to this daily menu of lies and bile and distortions, all made to look as though it's packaged as news, when it is a narrative which is absolutely manufactured to promote the Tories, to promote Boris Johnson, and to undermine Corbyn. You have got economists, 161 economists who have now come out and said that Labour's economic plans are not just viable, but they're necessary to improve growth and to have a proper distribution of wealth across society. And yet what you get every night on the mainstream media is, oh, these plans can't work, or these plans will bankrupt the economy. Bankrupt the economy? We've got £1.2 trillion worth of debt today. Not in feeding the poor, not in giving houses to the homeless, not in giving proper jobs to people who are working 30 and 40 hours a week. We're bankrupt on the back of giving tax cuts to millionaires and tax cuts to corporations. It is sickening, Richie. It's absolutely sickening. I seen a statistic the other day, I don't know if you saw it, mate, but we now have the atrocious, absolute, despicable statistic of six people in the UK whose combined fortune of £39.4 billion is more than 13 million people in the UK. 6 people, more wealth than 13 million. That, to me, is simply unacceptable. If people hear these statistics, read these statistics, and they're not angry, then quite frankly, they don't care. There's something wrong with them. There's no compassion. Because we don't have a problem in this country of being able to give people a higher and better quality of life. As Gandhi used to always say, we don't have a problem satisfying people's needs, but we do have a problem satisfying people's greed.
Last word to you. I want to ask you, it's a big question to go out on. I don't believe in the democratic process. I think the very first time I spoke to you. I've not voted for years. I voted back in 2002. My 3 parties, proportional representation, were Sinn Féin, the Socialist Workers' Party, and the Workers' Party, because it set up politics so that no matter how decent the people who get elected are, even if they are, and they're usually not, they can't win. For me, it's got to be ultimately about civil disobedience, a bit more of what the French are doing, a bit more of the Gilets jaunes. We're eventually going to have to do that, Tommy. I think in a few years' time, we're going to be driven to that. We're going to have to get out on the streets. Last word to you on that. Thanks for coming back today, and I hope you'll come back after the election to have a reflection on the results. Last word then, civil disobedience, it's the only way eventually, is it?
Civil disobedience is an essential part of progress in society. We had civil disobedience in relation to the anti-poll tax campaign. I was honoured to lead that campaign. I was sent to jail as part of that campaign, but that campaign was successful because it was civil disobedience that united the working class in the interest of defeating Thatcher and her poll tax. But my final word would be this, Richie. Of all of the elections, I'm 55 years of age. Of all of the elections in my adult life that I have witnessed, I think this is the most crucial, because this is the only one I can ever remember where there was actually a fundamental difference on offer. What Corbyn and Labour are offering in England and Wales and what the SNP is offering in Scotland is fundamentally different to what Johnson and the Tories is offering. This isn't red Tories. This is a socialist, transformative manifesto that would radically change people's lives, Richie. And from that point of view, I would go as far to appeal to those that are maybe of an anarchist-syndicalist approach to life, who sometimes say, don't vote, it only encourages them. I know where you're coming from. I can accept that you've got a philosophical base for your argument. But on this election, please examine the stark differences in economic and social programmes that are on offer. If Corbyn was to win this election, or at least have enough to form a majority with SNP support, you could have lives of millions transformed for the better, Richie. And that's why I would say, if you live in England or Wales, vote Labour. If you live in Scotland, vote SNP.
And as I'm a man of my word, even though I do take issue with some of that, I'm not going to respond to it, because the last word was yours on that. Thanks, Tommy. Great to have you back on the show today. And let's catch up when the results are in, and let's do an analysis of them. Tommy can be read at sputniknews.com, by the way. Follow him on Twitter. He's at Citizen Tommy on Twitter. Really appreciate your time, mate. I know you're busy. Thanks for doing it.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye now.
Cheers, Tommy. Tommy Sheridan live on the line to us there from his home in Scotland. Right, where are we? We're about 6 o'clock, I think. Number of comments came in there about Labour betraying Brexit. Yes, and I did have that out with Tommy in previous programmes. We've argued about that on previous programmes. I've said that to him, you know. I've said that even if I was inclined to vote and support Labour, which I don't and I won't, I've said to Tommy, the leader of the party and his chancellor, his shadow chancellor, would be committed Eurosceptics and have been for most of their lives, but yet they flip-flopped on that, and they've betrayed working men and women across the north of the country particularly. So Danny, who tweeted about that, I get you, Danny, or Jimmy even, it's Jimmy, sorry Jimmy, on Twitter. I've had these discussions with Tommy before. I've butted heads with Tommy Sheridan about that in the past. I'll be joined real soon by Maria Heller. Lot to talk about US politics, of course, and the news that the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, we heard from earlier on, are prepared to proceed with a vote in Congress to impeach the US President Donald Trump. That's all very interesting to me, that is, because even though the Senate is Republican controlled, I'm not convinced that it wouldn't get past the Senate. Remember, this is a puppet show, all of this. Politics, it's a theatre, it's one big puppet show, and that would be manna from heaven to the elite. I really do believe that. Manna from heaven. A massive, global, televised impeachment hearing starring Donald Trump. I think it's a real possibility. We'll talk to Maria about that and much more in a couple of minutes' time. Before we do that, though, it's time, well, it should be time, for the headlines. And have I been late dragging the headlines in again? Have I? I might have been late dragging the headlines in, so let's drag in the headlines. Keep the tweets coming in, by the way. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. And I'll read your tweets out as we go along. Can we get the headlines from FSN? Can we? I think we can we? Yeah, we can. Here's the headlines. Ollie Barrett from FSN in London.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. Major disruptions being caused in France by a general strike over pension reform. The UK, France and Germany say Iran is developing nuclear-capable ballistic missiles that would violate a UN Security Council resolution. Germany's factory orders unexpectedly fell in October as Europe's largest economy struggles to fight off recession, and it's exactly a week until Britain votes in a general election.
Cheers, Ollie. 3 minutes past 6, The Richie Allen Show. Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv. We're on the TuneIn radio app as well, and a number of you have been sending me nice memes, Spotify memes. The programme does have a lot of listeners on Spotify, and Spotify has published its figures today, its podcasting figures, and a number of you have been sharing some nice memes with me. I do appreciate that. More in a minute.
Renowned healer Mark Byersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Byersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbyersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Now, Maria Heller joins us after the Four Tops, yeah. Diana Ross will be in Manchester next April. I'm sorely tempted. Diana Ross, you know. Anyway, here's the Four Tops. It's 5 minutes past 6. Maria Heller is standing by, and she joins us live from Arizona in 2 minutes. Right, music from the Four Tops. I want to give a big shout out to John Nichols. I love John. He's not old, John, but he's been listening to the programme for a long time. I think I know John phoned in to one of the recent phone-in shows. He makes these hilariously funny memes and sends them to me based on some of the stupid things that I say in the radio show. And I mentioned the other day about Kay Burley and mud wrestling and stuff like that. And I referenced the Ivan Reitman movie Stripes with Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. And John put together this fantastic meme of Kay Burley mud wrestling. It looks so real, it's untrue. I don't know whether I'm turned on or whether I'm repulsed, John. I better claim to be repulsed, because if I say I'm turned on by it, well, I'm finished then, you know. Right, now, let's get Maria back on the programme. Nice to know you're listening, by the way, John, and everybody else. Do keep tweeting. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. You can engage others on Twitter by going to twitter.com, Richie Allen Show, all one word. If you type Richie Allen Show, all one word in, you will be able to see what other people are tweeting me. I've said this 1,000 times because I've spoken to this lady 1,000 times. She's a fantastic broadcaster. You know, what I would call old school. Not so much of the old, because she's not old, but she's an old school reporter and broadcaster, and it's got the longest running podcast on the internet, which you can hear at meria.net. That's meria.net. Brilliant woman. I'm so glad that I met her through the People's Voice television in London back in 2013. Lot to talk about today, of course, with impeachment, and even this week, Donald Trump claiming not to know Prince Andrew, and then a half a dozen photographs coming to light, which proved that once again the hairpiece was lying through his teeth. Live from Arizona, welcome back, the great Maria Heller. How you doing, kid? Are you well? Welcome back.
Hi, Richie. How are you? Good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Thanks for coming on this week. Whenever I ask you on, it's a strange thing. You've been educating me over the years about astrological planes and the importance of astronomy and astrology to our lives. When I had a few minor technical problems last month, you said to me, Richie, that's Mercury in retrograde. And there used to be a time when I would have laughed behind your back. I would have said, yeah, thanks, Marie. But you're right, though. You're right more often than not. So there must be something to it. But whenever I do invite you on, really salient things happen. And today's a big day, of course, because the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has said we are going to proceed. There will be a vote in Congress about whether or not to impeach Trump. Now, even though the Senate is Republican controlled, how significant is this news today?
It's huge. I mean, this is the third president in history to be impeached. Whether we already know that the bought and sold for Senate isn't going to say get him out of office, but this will be on his record. Listen, you saw it yesterday at NATO. No one in the world respects Trump, so this will be one more blow to his ego. And also, you know, it kind of makes him a lame duck president no matter what he does. So, I mean, this is just the law, and the law needs to be followed. Listen, I mean, I lived through and, reported on, Clinton's impeachment, and that was over a blowjob, a consensual blowjob. So,
not to put too fine a point on it.
I got a chance to see the email I sent out yesterday when I was blurbing my show to let people know the new show was up. But I sent out links to, I think it was something like McSweeney.com or something, which lists over 500 of Trump's infractions since he started running for office. I mean, it's amazing. Whoever compiled that list must have been exhausted afterwards.
Yeah. This is where you always... I wish we could do... I think in the future we will do. I know it's going to happen. You and I are going to do a show in the same room. I've got to meet you before I shuffle off this mortal coil, because I love listening to you. We'll have to do a show because you'll want to strangle me. And I love that. You are going to want to strangle me. He is a monumental bastard. He is as dirty as they come. But he's just the latest in a long line of dirty bastards, right?
Oh, absolutely. But he's the worst one. I mean, it's nonstop. Richie, I'm so sick of him being on TV 24 hours a day. Yeah. All the news is just him. It's like he sucked up all the oxygen on the entire planet. I mean, he's increased my workload, I would say at least 10 times over, just trying to cover the everyday maniacal words that come out of his hallucinatory mind.
Isn't it funny, though? Yesterday, you're quite right. So you had the Canadian Prime Minister, you had Johnson, you had others seemingly sniggering at Trump behind his back. But that will only galvanise Trump's base, won't it? Because they will say, well, you see, Trudeau is filthy, Johnson is filthy. Now, I could tell you all about Johnson. He is, of course, absolutely filthy. They will say, there's Donald, he's standing against them. It proves to Trump's supporters, it proves to them, not to me or to you, but to them it says, well, look, there he is, he's the maverick on his own, and these guys don't like him because Trump is good and he's fighting the deep state.
Well, Trump supporters are going to get a nice Christmas present from Trump. So we'll see if they still love him so much, because he's just decided to cut food stamps to several 100,000 Americans, and most of them live in Trump states. So they're going to go hungry on Christmas because Ebenezer is in the house. And he also wants to cut their Medicaid. And he wants to pass more hateful laws against the homeless. His solution with the homeless, I assume, is going to be execution.
Well, he's not going to want to. Hang on. As much as I love you, he's not going to want to execute them. He's not going to want to do that. Tell me more about.
Well, let's get back to this story, because today, and I did my news show early because I knew I was coming on your show, so I had a shitload of news to get out there.
Yeah.
And the Trump administration wants to bring back federal executions, which haven't happened in this country in, I think, 13 years. So we have a lunatic at the helm who's a total fascist. Who doesn't know what he's doing. The whole world knows he doesn't know what he's doing. And as far as Trump's fans, listen, arguing with them or trying to educate them is like trying to argue the Bible with a Jehovah's Witness. Save your breath.
Yeah. But again, we're back to something that you and I have butted heads about over the years. Because the choice back in 2016 was either him, and despite the fact that he is incredibly odious and horrible, and I know there are a million things in his past to do with women and girls and underage girls, I know this to be absolutely true. People were left with the choice of him and Hillary, and I'm telling you this. If I'd have been your next door neighbour in Arizona in 2016, and if I'd believed in voting, I would have cast my vote for him over Hillary Clinton back in 2016. I would have done, as bad as he is.
Here in America, when you get the choice between cancer or AIDS, people still don't want to wake up to the fact. I've been screaming for 20 years that everybody should be independent and vote third party. But the third party in this country doesn't even get a chance at a debate. I mean, it's like they don't exist. So I've voted third party for many, many years now. Which I think surprises some people when they get into a conversation with me, like my friends over at the gym. They'll kind of wait for me to get there because they like to really bust my chops. And yesterday we had quite the lively conversation, but one of them said, well, but that's because you're a Democrat. And I look at them and say, no, I'm not. So when you can separate yourself from the two parties, you can get people to listen to you.
I want to talk about this guy, Schiff, Adam Schiff. And I've been reading quite a bit, obviously yourself and listening to you, and I've read a lot of the US press coverage of this guy. This guy is leading the charge against Donald Trump, leading the bid to impeach him. But this guy is pretty filthy himself, isn't he? I mean, I don't have your expertise, but looking around news stories over the years, not just news stories, but statements given, depositions given, this guy has a history of telling lies to support his narrative.
Well, you know what? I haven't really delved into Adam Schiff because he's just the guy who won the draw. Actually, Jerry Nadler thought he was going to get to run this. But one thing I will say about Adam Schiff, I don't know how he does it, how he doesn't lose his calm sitting next to an idiot like Devin Nunes, who Lev Parnas has now outed as part of this whole Ukrainian scheme too. I don't know how he keeps his cool. I can honestly tell you, I could never do what he's doing and not want to punch somebody in the face.
Well, you know what? Again, one of the things that I discovered, which kind of pricked my ears up, like yourself, I have no time for any of them. But one of the things that Schiff has been saying repeatedly is that when the Trump administration put the call transcript on a top secret server, they said that was an extraordinary step, and it showed, that it was very shifty and very dodgy by Trump's people. Now, Schiff knew that was untrue. he knew that Barack Obama had done this several times. And we know this because Susan Rice admitted it. And all I'm saying is that just gives ammunition to Trump supporters, because you and I believe, and I know you believe this, you're an unimpeachable journalist, you, and I'm not kissing your arse, I know you are. You can't beat Trump up for doing something in an impeachment proceeding when somebody that you supported did the very same thing. You've got to be whiter than white.
And the problem is, Hillary did the same thing and Trump accused her of doing the same thing. So, listen, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm not one of those people that believes in taking the high road. That was a huge mistake that Trump made, not Trump, but Obama made, thinking he could deal with the demons on the GOP side. And when you look at Joe Biden, he's saying the same thing, reach across the aisles. There is no reaching across the aisles. These people, obviously, they're very wealthy. They were probably raised very wealthy, probably went to private schools, whatever, protected from everything in life.
Yeah.
But you know what? I grew up on the streets of New York, and I knew if you had a bully in the schoolyard, you needed to defend yourself. You needed to beat the crap out of that person, or you were going to get beat up every day for the rest of your life. So there was no high road to be taken with a bully or somebody threatening you. But, you look at it, listen, you and I both know it's all theater. Theater for the idiots that will not do any homework on their own.
Yeah.
I'm disgusted in how little real patriotism I see in this country. What else does this man need to do to show he's unqualified for the job? And I've been screaming about this for a long time, Richie. I think before somebody runs for president, besides seeing their tax returns, besides a physical, we should have a mental evaluation. We should have a spiritual evaluation. Where are these people coming from? They're loading our courts with Federalist Society judges who want to take us back to the Stone Age. Democrats aren't saying anything about it. I don't hear one of them say anything about it in any of the debates.
No, of course not. Because you've brilliantly summed up what this is. And the very first time you and I butted heads about Trump, whom I have no time for, I think Trump is repugnant in every sense of the word. Ultimately, it's one big puppet show. Him being put in there, the reality TV president, to distract us all from the important things. One of the things that really annoyed me about Schiff, Adam Schiff, when I watched the impeachment stuff, was when he did this kind of dramatization of Trump's calls with President Volodymyr, even though his dramatization actually had no basis in reality to the actual transcript, all that stuff. All I'm saying is this just gives loads of ammunition to Trump supporters. Not all Trump supporters are bad people.
His supporters now are down to 26%.
Is that what the polls are at the moment? 26%.
Right.
Wow.
So, some of them are waking up, especially the women in the Republican Party. They have had enough of him. And that's happening nationwide, where women are dropping out like crazy from the GOP. I didn't know why it took so long. I mean, to me, it's like this guy's obviously a woman hater. He only picks on women, especially women of color. He's a woman abuser. He's a sexual abuser. He's a pedophile. He's been to Orgy Island, and I'm sure he and Prince Andrew have, swapped stories. Clinton was there too, both Clintons.
How stupid is Trump, Maria? Maria, Trump has got to be the stupidest MF in recent years.
He is. Listen, I would give anything for 1 hour with him, face to face. That's all I'd need. 1 hour. Let's talk.
Well, you tie him up in knots in 3 minutes. But to deny knowing Prince Andrew when evidence is in the public domain that not only did you meet him, but you were pretty chummy with him. I mean, how stupid is it?
I know Prince Andrew, he's a lot of fun. He said that years ago. What these people forget is the way they use social media and the internet to spy on us. Everything they ever did, said, tweeted, posted, everybody digs up and throws right back in their face.
Yeah, it's the brilliance of Twitter, isn't it? It's like when this dubious rabbi in the UK had a go at Jeremy Corbyn. It was very easy to go back through 4 months of tweets to see him tweeting pictures of himself with Boris Johnson. So his intervention wasn't really on behalf of, poor Jewish people. His intervention was because he's a Conservative Party supporter. If you've got a social media footprint, Maria, you're going to be found out, right? It's as simple as that.
Well, I mean, they'll find out anything and everything. I mean, just today, when I posted my show, I used a quote that Trump had made when Obama was president. And that tweet, by the way, is going around. It's viral. And it's a tweet he made in August of 2014. And here it is. We need a president who isn't a laughingstock to the entire world. We need a truly great leader, a genius at strategy and winning, respect. So obviously he was talking about Obama, who I don't recall was a laughingstock to the world. But everybody's throwing his own stuff right back in his face. And what I don't understand is he denies it like it's not part of reality. He just denies everything.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And he's one of those people, he always accuses people of what he's guilty of. The best thing, I think, the funniest line that he ever tweeted was, do I look like a guy who needs hookers? Yeah. To any thinking woman, yeah. And you know what? There's not enough money in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, man, I don't care how much money you got. You don't have enough. Listen, they made a huge mistake rolling Hillary out in 2016. I said it through the whole campaign. I was for Bernie in 2016. I'm for Bernie in 2020. And I'm sure the Democrats will do the same thing the media is doing to Bernie that they did in 2016.
Well, hang on a second now. You said, by the way, the great Maria Heller is on the line live from Arizona. Go to Meria.net. You are. I say that because I'm going to give you some stick now. It's Meria.net, Meria.net. You said they rolled out Hillary. They didn't roll out Hillary. She stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. She did.
Absolutely.
We know that she was responsible.
And when I try to tell people that, they argue with me, and I try to remind them, do you remember when Bernie had a toss in his hat when they nominated Hillary that night? He showed up with bruises on his face.
Yeah, she should be in prison.
The story supposedly was that he was visited by suits in his hotel the night before.
And you know what? This is why I love you. You know that. My audience, half of them, my audience loves listening to you. But many of them, they want to kill you because they're like, what's wrong with her? But they're like, what's wrong with her? There she is. She's saying that there's a strong possibility that people connected to the Clintons assaulted Bernie Sanders. They stole the nomination. We know all about the Democratic servers. How could she say that Trump is worse than Hillary? That's what they'll be screaming at you. He's not. He's an angel compared to Hillary.
Hillary knew the system. She knew the job. She's educated. I'm not saying we'd be in a better position with her, but I think America has learned that you can't just pick Joe Blow off the street and make him president.
Right.
I'm not saying, believe me, I'm no fan of Hillary Clinton. God knows I covered her for all the years that they were in power.
You did, to be fair, yeah. And Bush and Obama.
And Bush, oh my God. I thought he'd be the worst I'd ever cover, but Trump makes you long for the days.
Do you know what I would pay? If I was a television executive, I would do... This is the way it's going anyway. It's become so theatrical and so stupid. I would get Bush and Trump and get them playing... I don't know, Family Fortunes, or get them playing Wheel of Fortune or something like that, just to see who is the dumbest. I want to change to a story that's designed to get your blood boiling. Now, when I read this today, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it because I covered this story back in 2012. I was in Spain at the time. This is some story. Our listeners might not remember Trayvon Martin, but he was a young black lad.
Oh, yeah.
You know this story today, right? This is unbelievable.
I'm shocked over it.
Oh, unbelievable. Trayvon Martin was a young boy who walked through a neighbourhood to take a shortcut home. That's all he was doing. He had some Skittles and he had some food. He was a good kid. He was an athlete and he was well liked. And he was shot.
He was black.
And he was black. Oh, I said that. I said he was black. And he was shot dead by a guy called George Zimmerman, who wasn't even arrested until about 6 weeks later. Wait for it. Today I learned, and you know this, George Zimmerman, who shot dead the unarmed black teenager Trayvon Martin, is suing Trayvon's family, the attorney, the US state of Florida, and others for about £77 million, which is $100 million. What in the name of all that is sacred is going on here?
I'm stunned by that. I can't believe that guy still walks among us and still breathing, because... If that was a member of my family, listen, Italians have a saying, we don't call the cops, we call family.
Yeah.
And they made that guy almost like a celebrity as the years went on after he killed that young boy. Because Florida, and I emphasize DUH at the end of it, has that stand your ground bullshit law, which basically gives you open permission to shoot anybody you want if you come up with the right excuse.
Yeah, and then say that you had an argument or something. That's what freaked me out. Stand your ground. You and I could be, passing each other in the street, and you could shoot me, and then you could tell the attending police officer that I started arguing with you and I started pushing you around, and you'd be okay.
Exactly. Listen, this country needs to really look at. This morning we had a shooting at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you saw that story.
Yeah, 3 people, I think, yeah.
Right, but some sailor obviously went off his rocker and decided to start firing in Pearl Harbor. And until something is done to address the mental crisis in this country, because to me, anybody that shoots anybody else, unless it's self-defense, is mentally ill. Because a normal human being doesn't hurt another human being. So looking at that story, believe me, I couldn't believe it myself, Richie. I think I sprouted a few more white hairs just looking at that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just to bring our listeners up to speed on it, he's basically suing because he says that his constitutional rights were violated because the state put a fake witness up against him. That's his contention anyway. You would imagine that this guy would have just gone away somewhere very quietly. He murdered an unarmed black teenager. He did. It's as simple as that.
And he's been arrested several times since for different altercations. Why is this guy still walking the streets? That's what I want to know. But listen, in this country, because I call my news of Planet of the Apes, I need a stronger title. I'm thinking of calling it Bizarro World, but I think Superman Comics took that one years ago.
Yeah, no doubt.
When you look at what we celebratize in this country, I mean, there's something seriously wrong with the American psyche.
I've seen quite a bit of American television recently. I shouldn't have, but I've been given an app. It's an illegal app, Maria, but it makes me laugh. I watch some sports on it, and I'm giving the game away now on live radio, but I do have an illegal app. And I watch US television, and the advertisements, every second one is glorifying the military, isn't it? Every second ad. What is going on?
Glorifies the military, and every ad, on regular TV here. I don't know which stations you're watching, NBC, but every ad is for another drug.
Or a drug. That's right. It's either a military ad with some very well produced little film of young men and women standing on America's coasts promising to defend us all.
Right. Who are we defending ourselves against?
Yeah. Who's going to attack America?
Well, maybe Kim Jong-un. I mean, I'm sure you read his latest threat to Donald Trump, right? Pick your own Christmas gift. I mean, if that's not a threat, I don't know what it is. But, listen, you could say whatever you want about the past presidents, but Trump gave Kim Jong-un a shining star on the world stage. Up until Trump, everybody ignored him. Nobody played into his game. And now he's threatening the United States.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is now, to put the other side of it across, if you've got a guy like Kim Jong-un, and you and I both believe, I think we both believe that it's not a great place to live, North Korea. It can't be great for the people there. It's a really seriously oppressive, autocratic place. It's not nice. And the guy and his family have harboured, a desire to have nuclear weapons. So I'm going to give Trump a pass on this now, just to get you and I again. But I mean this. I would rather that we kind of formed some sort of accord with these people rather than, isolate them and leave them to their own devices.
But there is no accord. Even Kim Jong-un admitted that. His prime minister, whatever their titles are, said today, all these meetings were just, there is no dialogue. We've come to no agreement, and we've given him till the end of the year. So, they said they don't want to talk to Trump. They don't want to talk to this administration anymore. They don't want to give him another photo op. So I'm not saying whether or not they should have nuclear weapons, because I believe nobody should have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but at least he tried, right, Trump? I mean, Trump supporters might say, but at least he's tried to... No? You're not going to give him a pass on that?
Listen, there's nothing genuine about him. Everything he does for his own self-aggrandizement, we'll put it that way. Yeah. Everything to him is a TV show. He loves the camera. And this guy will just spout off lies left and right. Like yesterday when, he's been manipulating the stock market with all his tweets, especially on China and the trade deal.
Now
China basically said there is no trade deal. And now China's hitting us with tariffs. And Trump says, well, we'll wait for a deal until after the 2020 elections.
Now, you've just touched on something really important. Maria Heller is our guest. We've got another 20 minutes or thereabouts with Maria today. You've touched on something really important. So Trump's political enemies are using the phone call with the Ukrainian president as a stick to try and beat him with. And I think, ultimately, I don't think it's going to amount to very much. I don't think. However, why don't they? And this is the $64 million question. You've just brilliantly brought into focus something very important. I have no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump is tipping certain people off before he opens his big fat mouth on Twitter. And if he's doing that, he is as you said, he's manipulating. That is that's insider trading. That is, he's giving.
Yeah, but what most Americans don't know, Richie, and you might not know either, it's perfectly legal for members of Congress to participate in insider trading.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be legal for Trump to let some business associates of his know that he is about to tweet something that might have an effect on certain stocks.
Yeah, but he has. There's been many reports on, when he was going to do the metal tariffs, how one of his friends benefited by selling short and whatnot.
So why doesn't the Democrats go after him for that then? Is it because they do the same thing?
They got a million better reasons, a million stronger cases. So why don't they? That's a good question. Maybe we need to look at why, when Congress's salary is $174,000 a year, they were all multimillionaires.
Yeah.
That's where it starts. Listen, they all feed at the same trough. The Democrats, 2 weeks ago, passed Trump's budget and slid in renewing the Patriot Act. How come no one's talking about that?
Yeah, the renewal of the Patriot Act, which, of course, remind us, Maria, that was post-September the 11th, wasn't it? Dreadful thing.
Of course, but it was written before 9/11. I think Clinton wrote the Patriot Act, and then they rolled it right out on top of us because it was thousands of pages after 9/11.
Do you think Bill Clinton would have had knowledge that September the 11th was going to happen or something like it?
I don't know about that. I think they just like these evangelicals, the Federalist Society, they've had a new constitution written for many years to replace our constitution with biblical law. So they're just waiting for the right opportunity. And the way they're throwing in their judges, I think that opportunity's coming closer than people realize.
Barack Obama left office. My learned friend, Jean Ann Crowley, who's listening raptly, she's very interested in what you're saying and is enjoying the conversation, I believe. She says, how come Obama left office so wealthy? That's a brilliant question. Barack Obama didn't...
For the same reason they all do.
Yeah.
For the same reason they all do. Listen, these people don't serve us. They serve themselves. Our government has forgotten they're supposed to work for us. And the American people have forgotten that the government works for us, not the other way around. And who was it? I think it was Jefferson who said, when people fear the government, you have tyranny. When the government fears the people, you have freedom.
And the French.
But Americans don't know anything about civics. They don't know anything about the law. They don't know anything about their rights because that curriculum's been taken out of the school system many years ago, Richie.
You're absolutely right, Maria. And it's funny. Again, you make a good point here. It's not funny that you make a good point. You make many good points, it must be said. But we're talking today here about the massive strikes taking place in France. Quite rightly, the French people will not have their pensions destroyed by the president.
Good for them. At least they understand. Listen, the French know real liberty, and they're not afraid to start a revolution if they start losing.
You're
what
absolutely
they
right.
But
in the United States and in the UK, it's reported as if the French are crazy. It's reported as if it's a terrible thing. They're going on strike. They're screwing with people's travel plans. Hang on a second. The president, Rothschild's Emmanuel Macron, it must be said, wants to decimate their pensions. And the French might win. They will stay on the streets for as long as it takes. And but they will back down the government. I believe the government will back down. But yet, further west of France, why don't British and American people and Irish people say, fuck yeah, excuse my language, yeah, that's what we should be doing, but we don't.
Well, maybe you guys got to bring back that movie, Viva Vendetta, and start playing it on every TV screen in your country. And here in America, I think people are just too lazy. They're in fear. They're fearful of losing their jobs. They've already lost their pensions, their IRAs, their investments, everything else. So they're so afraid of losing their minimum wage job. By the way, minimum wage hasn't gone up in the United States in over 10 years. So I'd like to see how anybody can live on $7.25 an hour. They're just exhausted. They're poisoned. The air is poisoned. Our air pollution's up 14% since Trump took office. He's gutted the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. People are eating garbage for food, crap that passes for food that I would never feed even to a dog. They're all drugged out, as you see from those drug ads. If we needed a revolution in this country, I don't think we can physically do it. I think most Americans are, close to death on the health scale.
And if Bernie did, by some miracle, become the next president of the United States, it's unlikely, and I don't want to be depressing anybody who might be listening to this. Even if he did, the constraints placed on any president by the legislature, he wouldn't have a chance, Maria, of doing anything, would he? He'd get nothing past Bernie.
Well, that's what they did to Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Okay, Jimmy Carter won the popular vote. He was a good president. He was starting solar energy. He was doing all the right things in the 70s. But the powers that be lined his whole cabinet with the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. So that clipped his wings. There was nothing he could do. And he had nothing to say about it. He couldn't stop it. So, until we go to the men behind the curtains, nothing's going to change. Not in my country, not in your country. And it all goes back to, the usual players, the Rothschilds, the City of London, the reptiles, the Vatican, the Jesuits. I mean, until these people are exposed and called out on the carpet, nothing's going to change because everybody seems to have a price and everybody seems to be okay living in fear.
There's an amazing scene in a brilliant Steven Spielberg film called Catch Me If You Can about Frank Abagnale. I know you've seen the film. It's amazing.
Yeah, I remember that, the pilot, right?
Absolutely amazing. And there's an amazing scene in it when he's very young. He goes to the bank with his father, who's played by Christopher Walken, and he goes to open an account, and his father tells him something really important. And he says to him, you've got to come here, you've got to deal with these people. He said, because they control all the money. If you want to do something, if you want to be anybody, if you want to open something, you've got to come and get it off of these people. They control it all. And, often within Hollywood films, you'll get little passages of clips, and scenes like that basically lays it on the line for people. Without the money men, without the Oppenheimers, the Warburgs, as you said, the City of London, the European Central Bank, the IMF, the Rothschild family, without these people, nobody can do anything, not even a puppet like Trump. But that's the thing that you try to get through to people. We're having this election here next week, as you know, Maria, right. And we have English people and Scottish and Welsh people arguing over identity politics, arguing over stupid things.
I'm stunned at how they keep demonizing Jeremy Corbyn for being an anti-Semite. I mean, how long are they going to get to play that card?
Right up until next Wednesday. They'll keep going.
I think it's disgusting. And then I was reading that Boris Johnson, definitely put space between him and Trump because he didn't want Trump ruining his election for him.
Oh, these are mad times. If you haven't checked Maria's show, we've got another 10 minutes, but if you haven't checked Maria, go to Meria.net, Meria.net. Maria's rare enough anyway in that she's a woman. There aren't too many women in the independent media. One of the things that I don't like identity politics, and I don't like these targets, and I've criticised the BBC today for social justice. They say they want more black staff, even though it seems like they've got lots of black staff. They want more lesbians, they said last year, even though apparently they've got lots of lesbians. But we need more female voices in the independent media, there's no doubt about that. Is that something that occurs to you, Maria, about people setting up podcasts and setting up radio shows and talking about these things? Very few women, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, what woman would want to do this? That's number one. Number two, I've been kind of blacklisted because I'm a woman, even on all these years, it's 20 years, Richie, where I don't get invited on other people's shows or whatnot because I'm a woman. A lot of male broadcasters that came and went or are on their way to jail now, vilified me, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? I let it roll off my back because I'm not your typical woman. Okay. I got three great things going for me. I'm smart, I'm Italian, I'm from New York, and I'm really good at what I do.
Well, you are really good at what you do. There's no doubt about that. I'm going to pull you up on this, though. How do you know that they didn't want to invite you on because you were a woman? What gave you that impression?
Because it never happened in 20 years. I remember getting in the early years death threats and other threats from what was supposedly alternative broadcasters. Luckily, as I said, I'm Italian, so I have friends in low places who took care of those people for me, and they never bothered me again. Okay.
You would have been a huge shock, all right, in the early days. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I didn't know you 20 years ago, but listening back, it would have been a massive kick in the backside to people to hear this ballsy
there have
Italian
been,
woman.
Some really great people I've had on my show that have certainly promoted me. I mean, Greg Palast is probably one of the best.
Yeah.
He always he just calls me the grandmother of internet radio.
the godmother. More like the godmother. Of course, it was
the godmother. I like that too. You can kiss my ring.
You kissed the ring, yeah. It was David Icke that put me on to you years ago. It was David who said. So you have always had serious analysts and serious researchers who've known that what you've done and what you're doing is very important. But look, I've
had everybody from the FBI to you name it spy on me. I'm currently under another 30-day ban on Facebook. The only reason I can see you on Twitter is I took a hint from Mitt Romney and went in under a different name.
Use a different name, yeah.
So, I mean, even the people I work out with, they say to me, you're being watched then, right? You're being targeted. I don't live my life in fear, Richie. I never did, never will. What's the worst that could happen? Somebody kills you. Well, then you're free. You can leave this crazy mental asylum that we all live in.
Yeah.
But if you're going to live your life in fear, then you deserve what you get. Okay. But, I had a really smart father. And everything to him was reading, writing, public speaking. I mean, he encouraged me my whole life. So I know I'm good at what I do. I have all the skills I need to do the work I do. I just need the support.
Yeah.
But I've been blacklisted for being a woman for many years. And it's hard for me to even find female guests.
I can buy into that. I'll tell you why. Because when I was in commercial radio many years ago, there was a culture. Now, it must be said, not at my radio station. The radio station I worked at, there were a lot of women working there, and they were valued and they were respected. And the reason they were valued and respected was because they were bloody good. Our radio station, I always believed in Waterford, was way above everybody else in that regard. And in fact, it showed because our listenership figures were huge and we always did well at the awards. But in a lot of other radio stations I visited, and I know this, there was a kind of a culture of the primetime lineup was mostly men, and they did have a pretty dismissive approach to women behind the mic, and I'll tell you why. Because it would often be mentioned by radio presenters and radio managers, say on the west of Ireland or on the east of Ireland or in the north of Ireland. Now, I was on the south, right? I was on the south coast. Some of those guys would mention to me, they would be bemused at the fact that we had so many female presenters. They were bemused by it. It's just like, how do you put up with it? And we were like, what do you mean, how do we put up with it? We're successful. The station does really well. The women are good. So I'm going to... Well, I wouldn't disbelieve you anyway, because I know you're an honest woman. So I can see why you would have been dismissed.
Listen, even when I did terrestrial radio, Jack Blood was my producer at the time, and I was the only one, really bringing in the stats. I was bringing in the listeners.
Yeah.
So Jack, and there were very few women. I don't even remember one other woman having a show on that station. And Jack had posited to the owners that you need to put Meria on primetime. We'll knock every other radio station off the air.
What was his reaction? The owner?
They refused to do it.
Right.
And they were two Italian guys that owned the station, so I gave them a few choice words in Italian and blew out of there.
You made them an offer that they couldn't refuse.
Exactly. So, listen, I know I'm not that typical woman that everybody expects to show up. Even though I got that whole Betty White thing going now, everybody thinks I'm just a cute little old lady because I got white hair. that's not who I am. It's like sometimes I think, the spirit of Al Capone lives inside my body. So it's like I don't want to get mistaken for some little sweet woman that's just going to sit back and you're going to stick me in a corner and forget me, because as long as I'm on this planet, I'm going to make noise, and I'm going to keep making noise until I can't.
Well, as long as I have a platform here, you'll always be welcome on here. I hope the IRS is not listening in now that you mentioned Capone.
Well, I'm always on top with my taxes. I never mess around because I know they would love nothing better than to lock me up.
Well, you're right to say that. If anybody is making independent media, and if you are earning any money, even if it's from subscribers or from YouTube, don't be stupid. Make sure you declare it. Everything that comes into this program, not that we get it, is declared.
That would be very
stupid. Too easy for them to bring you down, and of course, if they bring you down like that, they can take your equipment and everything else. So you've got to be. You mentioned your dad there, so he was obviously very important. He sounded like he was. I'm presuming he's not with you anymore. He sounds.
Oh no, my father left a long time
ago. So was he a union man? Was he an agitator? Was he? Was he a trade union?
My father was one of the most intelligent men I ever met. He was a barber. That's what he did for a living.
Good to me.
He had his own barbershop in Brooklyn. He supported a family of 7. He took care of my elderly grandparents who lived a flight above us. But for him, his daughters had to be the smartest and the best at everything.
Right.
So he had 6 daughters by the time he was done. And for an Italian man not to have sons was weird. So he basically raised us as if we were boys. He sat me down when I was 15, taught me how to handle my liquor. He had my older sister laying concrete when she was 12. I had my own house painting business when I was 18.
Amazing, Maria.
So we were not your typical eyelash batting girls. No. Not to say that we weren't feminine when we wanted to be. But we also were raised not to take any crap from anybody. And my father's famous thing that he taught all of us, which I think I heard like once a week at least, was fear no man. All they can do is kill your body. They can't touch your soul.
What an amazing guy he must have been. And he had the barber shop in Brooklyn. I've got to ask this because I've watched every gangster film that was ever made. I just watched The Irishman, Scorsese. It's worth...
Yeah, I saw it too. I thought it was a little too long.
A little bit too... That's a very good point. It could have been a half an hour or 45 minutes shorter. But interesting. The character development was good. Your father interests me now. With his barber shop... Would he have been? Would people have tried to shake him down?
Well, he didn't get shook down when he first started. When he was fairly young in Brooklyn, the Anastasia brothers were the gang at the time in our section of Brooklyn. So they used to have him hide swag and things like that in his barbershop.
Brilliant.
But one day they approached him and wanted him to carry a gun, and my father said he would not, and that's when he ended any association with them. But I was laughing because when I watched The Irishman and you have Sebastian Maniscalco playing Crazy Joe.
Yeah.
I dated his first cousin.
Did you? Wow.
So to me, it was like, it's always like a trip home. I just fell into the gangster world, if you want to call it, in my teenage years. And I tell you this, they had more dignity, respect, and rules and morals than any politician I've ever seen.
You're not the first person to say that to me over the years. And when your dad said, listen, I've done a bit of swag hiding, I've stored a bit of swag for you, but I'm not going to carry a gun, they left him be then, because, I've read stories over the years where they would have said, well, no, you're working for us now, you'll do what you're told, but they respected your dad.
They did respect him and they let him be. I mean, I was a little disappointed because growing up, all my girlfriends in school, all their fathers were in the mob. So these kids were loaded with money. Okay. They wore fur coats to school in junior high school. And I would tell my father, why? All my friends' fathers are gangsters and they're rich and you're just a barber. Why? Why did you miss that boat?
Yeah.
Because we grew up very, very poor because, it was one man supporting 7 people. But in those days, you could do that. In America today, there's no way one person can support a family of 7. There's just no way.
But he had no blood on his hands, apart from if he was hungover and he clipped somebody.
My father was pretty much a pacifist, but at the same time, if he had to duke it out with somebody to protect my mother or his children, he did it.
7 girls, eh? It's some story, Maria.
I know, what a family. Oh, please, I could make about 17 movies just on my early childhood.
And growing up around these gangsters, because when David Chase made The Sopranos, I saw an interview with an FBI agent who said that it was very, very accurate. The gangsters did really live, on the surface, very ordinary lives. They lived in their apartment buildings, and they tried to appear as if they were, the everyday Joe, but in fact they weren't. They were going out at night and, robbing places and stuff. Was that how it was with the gangsters in
Absolutely. Brooklyn? Listen, my first husband was the Suedo gangster, so I got to meet everybody from the Columbos to bodyguards to bookies to you name it.
Wow, Maria.
And and I remember so many things that those men told me. One big gangster said to me, "You got to remember, Richie, I was only like 17 or 18. And he looked at me and he says, "You know the difference between us and politicians?" And I said, "What?" He said, "They have a license to kill."
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, well, there's another difference." He said, "What?" I said, "You guys wear better suits." But I remember when The Godfather opened, the first movie of The Godfather, that movie had to be run by the major crime families for accuracy before they would allow it to be released. A lot of people don't know that. And I went with about 4 other gangster couples and their wives. I remember I was pregnant with my daughter at the time. And there I am sitting in a theater in New York, in Manhattan, watching this with a bunch of gangsters. And they were quiet as anything for the movie. And when the movie was over, they all gave each other the nod of approval on how well they were portrayed in the movie.
That is absolutely fascinating, that. My God, I'm stunned here. I'm stunned here, because I remember reading Puzo's The Godfather when I was young, and I remember being struck by one thing, and it was Puzo wrote Don Corleone, Vito, his name was Vito Andolini, and he ends up in Long Island, doesn't he? He ends up there.
Oh yeah, he actually ended up in the town I then continued to grow up in. I spent 22 years in the same town as The Godfather.
Yeah. And the whole
there was no crime. There's no crime in a neighborhood that any of these gangsters live in. So it's a good, safe place to live.
And people didn't have to go around in deference to these guys. Everybody
loved them. You saw, what was his name? Started with a G. John Gotti. Everybody loved him. They worshipped him like he was a god. Okay, but you got to understand, a lot of these criminals like Al Capone, they were very well liked by people because they weren't stealing from the poor like politicians do.
What they did was they stole stuff, and the average working guy like me, if you needed to buy stuff, you could buy it from those guys at a discount. So that's why they were liked.
Absolutely. They used to say it just fell off a truck.
Yeah, it fell off the back of the lorry.
They'd open up the trunk of their car and all the swag would be in there. And back in those days, you can get a carton of cigarettes for $2.50 from them. Pearls, the porno movies. It was amazing the kind of stuff that they ripped off. But, they had a sense of morals and ethics that the current new gangs in America don't have.
I'll tell you what, Maria, this is unbelievable. Because I remember one of the things when I read Puzo's book, I was really struck. It stuck in my mind for years, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. Puzo gave the Don an excuse for turning into the man that he did, because in the book the whole point is a very young Vito Corleone decides at some stage in his life that he is not going to be condemned to a life of poverty and mediocrity by a viciously ruthless, corrupt state. That's what it is.
Exactly. Well, people have to know American history. The Mafia, which, people say stands for the Mothers and Fathers Italian Association. The Mafia was asked to come to America because Italians were getting shaken down by the cops and the Irish. And remember, when Italians first came to America, their passports were stamped non-white. So they could only get jobs that white people didn't have.
Yeah.
And then after getting shaken down by the Irish, who were only allowed to go as high as a cop or a fireman, no higher than that, they needed protection, and they weren't getting the protection from the cops because the cops were the ones shaking them down. So the Mafia was brought here to help protect Italian Americans.
And then the Irish cops ended up on the payroll of the Mafia anyway, didn't they?
Right.
Many
with
of
a bullet
them,
through their heads, like in The Godfather.
Absolutely fascinating. Have you ever thought of writing? Listen, you're a young woman. I'm not patronising you. You'll say I'm not, but you are a young woman in this day and age. Have you ever thought of writing your memoirs? Because, Jesus, Maria.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If I write my memoirs, it would take as long as I've already lived to write it. And I'm still living. Do you know what I mean? Well, so many people have asked me to do that. You know, a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing Al Capone's niece.
Right. Wow.
And I still have that in my archives, besides the fact that her book also gave out some pretty good Italian recipes. But when you really understand that what Hollywood tells you is one thing, what your politicians tell you is another, but then there's the real story. And I would trust his niece telling his story more than anybody else. So now when people are trying to compare Donald Trump to Al Capone, I find it insulting because he couldn't shine Al Capone's shoes as far as I'm concerned. He's a wannabe gangster. Al Capone was the real deal.
And he's always been portrayed very badly in films.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, The Untouchables with Costner and De Niro, it portrayed him as a psychotic guy who would murder willy-nilly, but he wasn't that quick with the violence as he's portrayed in the films, as far as I understand.
Not.
Yeah,
of course not. But listen, that's what they do. In America, they glorify police, they glorify the FBI. I won't watch shows that do that. I'm not interested in seeing, these NSIs and all this other stuff everybody watches, because I know what cops really are like because I've experienced them since I was 16.
Of course you have, with your friends' fathers being in the mob. So tell us this then. Is there an accurate portrayal in film or television that people can watch that will give them a little bit of an insight into the life that you had growing up there in Brooklyn?
Well, some of my friends tell me that Married to the Mob is my life story. I would say that a lot of Scorsese's films were dead on, starting with Mean Streets. That was one of Robert De Niro's earliest movies.
Yeah.
But it was so accurate to life. There's another great one. It's long, but you'll love it, Richie. It's called Once Upon a Time in America.
Only saw that when I was very young. I vaguely remember that. I must watch that again. I've not seen that since I was a child. I shouldn't have seen it when I was a child, but I must watch it again.
Yeah, but to me, the best movies ever was, Godfather 1 and 2.
Yeah.
They never should have bothered with the third one, but I guess they figured they could make some money.
Yeah. Yeah, I could watch.
I would think a lot of that is accurate. There's just so much history Americans don't know, even going to the internment camps during World War II with the Japanese, that there were thousands of Italians also thrown into those internment camps because we were considered, again, non-white and beneath them and seditious. There were a lot of Italians that were hung. They were lynched the same as black people in America. And yet New York City wouldn't exist without Italians because nobody else knew how to build skyscrapers.
Isn't that amazing now? Because I, obviously, as a history student, would have learned about the internment of Japanese. But until you said it today, I've never heard of the notion of Italians being rounded up as well. And yet you're telling me, so it must have happened.
Absolutely. I think Mario Puzo also wrote the book The Black Hand.
Yes, which I didn't read. I've read all these books.
Yeah, that was another great book, but it tells you basically how, Italians were considered blacks when they came to this country. Listen, even when I've interviewed Italian authors, they didn't know that either.
Let me ask you this. We've run over, but sure, we can do another 5 minutes. With your permission, that is, of course.
Sure.
I know you've got plenty to do, and
sure,
I'm infringing on your time.
Your audience is probably saying, what the hell is going on with this conversation?
No, it's a brilliant conversation. Yeah, it's 7:00 and I should be gone now, but we'll stay for a few minutes. I want to ask you this, because I get this impression from some Italian Americans that not so much that they're pissed off of the Mafia, but they are pissed off as Italian people with the perennial association with organised crime. I remember a scene in The Sopranos. There were some Italian businesswomen not connected to the Mafia, and they were saying, they get pissed off every time, if you tell somebody that your surname begins with or ends with a vowel, it's
a stereotype.
Yeah, the Mafia. So is there a flip side to that? Would there be a considerable a kind of a considerable community of Italian people that are sick to death of hearing about the Mafia? No.
If there is, I haven't met them, Richie.
Because it's an important cultural
I
identity.
don't see the Mafia as anything bad as an Italian. Okay. I would prefer the gangsters run this country than the gangsters we have.
Yeah.
You know, if it wasn't for the Italians, you know, New York would have been lost during World War II. You know, they knew how to use the Italians when they needed the Union support and to, you know, to help them out. But the rest of the time, they were treated like crap.
Is it true, by the way?
And I'm not saying every Italian is in the Mafia, because they're not.
No, that would be absolutely... For anybody to think that, it would be ridiculous. Is it true that in these neighbourhoods where you had a connected man or a made guy living, that there wouldn't be any abject poverty? It wouldn't exist. I've read over the years from people, not in the famous books now, but in some of the other biographies, I've read that where you had made men and, if you want to say dons, there wouldn't have been anybody living in desperate circumstances, because all they needed to do was ask for a bit of help, and the help would come, and it wouldn't necessarily come with conditions. Is that true?
No, there was a lot of poverty. We had a lot of made men in the neighborhood I grew up in.
Right.
However, I will say they were very generous. If somebody needed something, and they would give it to you or donate it to you without you ever knowing where it came from.
All right, that sounds more reasonable than the fact that there was no poverty. And they would give stuff to people without any conditions. If somebody was poor,
a lot of times they would just take care of people. If a woman became a widow, they would just take care of her. You know, somebody, the rare person that had cancer or a heart attack, everybody would take care of them, their family.
Is that where Omerta came from then? Because people knew that these guys were no worse than the filthy, corrupt governments, and these guys might get you a job if you needed a job, or they might give you a loan, even if there was a bit of interest or whatever. But because
they were always, we used to call them Shylocks, which of course one of your politicians resigned
recently
over using that word.
Yeah.
But it was common knowledge when I was a kid, you know, Shylock was a word, you know, and most of the time the Shylocks were Jewish people that would lend you money at usurious rates, like they still do.
Yeah.
And if you went to an Italian, you know, that was your last thing to go to the mob for money, because their rates weren't inexpensive either, but it could also cost you a kneecap or your life if you didn't pay it back.
And yet they're remembered by Italians like you with such great fondness.
Well,
it's an era of great fondness.
I prefer them. Listen, I've always been attracted to gangsters, and I still am. They're just like real men. Do you know what I mean? They dressed like real men. They acted like real men. They protected their women, their children like real men. You know, when I look at some of what I see now in America that passes as a man, I'm like, oh God, thank God I'm out of that scene.
We could do a whole show on that. I've talked at length on the show about the emasculation of men. We've got men going around now wearing makeup, and I'm not talking about, you know, I mean, first of all, gay men. The gay men that I know, friends of mine, they've never worn makeup. It was never a thing in gay men, makeup. But now you've got young straight men wearing makeup and wearing kind of handbags, and wearing very skinny jeans and looking very effeminate. And
we got a major testosterone problem in this country. I don't know what it's like where you are, but here we have men in their late 20s who have erectile dysfunction. So, you know, it's like everybody's becoming, I don't know, hermaphrodites. Maybe we'll all become a nation of hermaphrodites. But there's a very lack of masculinity, or even how to identify as a man. And I'm not picking on men, because I love men. My best friend is a man. But, you know, even women, you know, women still are forced to do the feminine. You know, I was reading something about Melania. When she gets pissed at Trump, she'll dress in men's clothing because he likes women looking like, you know, sluts and tight, revealing clothes. So I think we have a problem with people don't even know how to just be who they are.
Yeah.
Okay, just be who you are. You know, if you're a man, I can't tell you how many times I've told my son through the years, man up. And he knows what I mean when I say that.
Yeah, be a man. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's good.
Right, whatever he's whining about or saying he can't, I'm all man up. Okay. And I think that listen, we could do 5 shows, I'm sure, on this topic alone.
No doubt about it. Your son, of course, he only had to look at his grandfather who raised 7 girls and managed to do so on a barber salary with the occasional bit of swag, of course,
those were in his early days.
Those were in his early days. Listen, we'll I don't know if you and I will reconnect on this program before Christmas. Probably not. It'll probably be January. Early January when we reconnect again. I don't know if I'm going to be.
I love it.
Yeah, I know we will, of course. Yeah.
Anytime. I want you back on my show. I want you back. Ooh, baby.
I had that lined up. Would you believe it? I had that lined up and it's just gone. I had the Jacksons just lined up and it's just gone. There's a coincidence now. Yeah. Do you see, this is it. When you tell me about these things, these stars and astrology, I won't be so quick to dismiss it in the future. If you haven't checked out Maria's program already, I'm sure you have, go to her website, meria.net, meria.net. Longest podcast on the web, that's a fact. Has worked at every level of the media.
And
like
it's a private club. That's what your subscription fee pays for. We are a private club for thinking people.
Can't recommend it highly enough, and you know I mean that.
Thank you, Richie.
Fascinating to talk about Trump and the impeachment and all of that earlier on, and brilliant to get into your own backstory, and fascinating times for you in Brooklyn in the 60s and 70s. Thanks, Maria. Love it.
Well, my pleasure. Anytime, Richie.
Can't wait to catch up again. You too. Bye for now. The brilliant Maria Heller live on the Richie Allen Radio Show for Thursday, December 5th. And that closes out the programme. What a way to finish the week. Brilliant stuff from Maria there. We'll chat again on Sunday morning for Sunday View. That's Sunday View on Sunday. You know what that's about. We look at the newspapers and we have a chat about the mid-morning talk shows and all of that. In the meantime then, have a fantastic weekend. Look after yourselves and one another. We'll close out the programme today with a bit of Lionel Richie. I couldn't grab the Jacksons back. I don't know what happened to it. It was in the player and then it just bloody well disappeared. This is Lionel Richie closing out the programme. Until Sunday, bye from me. See you soon. Bye.